I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning and welcome to the challenge. As always, we'd like to first and foremost thank God for this opportunity and thank you, the viewers, for tuning in. We are indeed especially grateful this morning to have our guest, Ralph Martin, to continue his interview with us. We wanted to do a part two. Ralph was calling the roll the last time we talked, and he's got to continue. Ralph was, quite frankly, a gentleman's gentleman who has been a lifelong resident of Hartford, certainly a pioneer in all respects, who has paved the way and opened the doors for quite a few of us. The possibilities were obviously apparent, with the people who he met for us to have the opportunities to do the things that we're doing now here in the corporate America and here, throughout the city and throughout the state of Connecticut. Ralph served as the butler to a list of dignitaries probably a mile long. And I think the last time we talked, Ralph, we were calling the rolls, and I think you stopped somewhere along the lines of the CEO of Ensign Bickford, which is a huge firm who provided glue and those kinds of things for people and for institutions and companies around the world.
Well, O.B. Ellsworth was president of Ensign Bickford. And like I say, I worked in so many of them's homes and did a lot of things that were great. Now, getting back to the butler side of it, I had to learn my craft from people who work part-time. All black men. There was no one else allowed to serve there. And they were elevator operators at G. Fox and Company, which was probably the biggest store in Connecticut back in the day. And there was Wise Smith, and their E.J. Corvette that came later, and Sage Allen. They hired black men. That was one of the few jobs a black man in Hartford could get. And they kind of trained me to do a lot of this type work. And they were kind of butlers in their own fields, such as they were runners for the presidents of the banks. They were dressed in uniforms like the travelers, and they let us drive the elevators and be janitors if you wanted a job there. Other than that, there were no other opportunities, especially for black men in the greater Hartford area back then. And there were many a butler who didn't only do the job if they were delivering packages or whatever it might have been. They also took care, the owner, did a little part-time driving, made a little extra money anywhere you can because the pay wasn't that great. And it was the same way with the pay at the Hartford Club, but I knew it was a steady job.
But so how did you, unless you are really up on your current affairs and events, how do you know that the Alexander Haigs of the world are coming through? Because he's the Secretary of Defense. How do you know that Sammy Davis Jr. From the GHO is coming in? Are they telling you beforehand that then you need to have yourself prepared to meet and greet certain dignitaries, and they're going to occupy certain places within the establishment? Is that how the process works?
Right. I was the first man that they would see. When they came in the front door, I normally would greet them. They would be introduced by the GM, my boss, and we were great partners together. He was from Germany, European trained, a lot of formal background. He was a heel clicker also when he met people, but I didn't click my heels. My shoes weren't qualified for that. But I did meet many a dignitary, as I had mentioned earlier in the broadcast.
I can't imagine though meeting Frank Sinatra and James Cagney. These people, man, were on the screen, man, and they were larger than life figures, man. I mean,
I know. Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck came to the Hartford Club.
Yeah, they all came.
That's just. I mean, I can't even imagine. How about Clark Gable? Did he ever show up?
Never
saw Clark Gable.
Yeah.
But I can't. I mean, there's an A-list of people who have showed up at the Hartford Club. I wonder if people in Hartford know that those folks were coming through town, and I especially wonder if the African American community knew that those folks were coming through town or had come through town.
Well, I learned to be kind of mouth shut, like I said earlier, and stay quiet. I didn't go around advertising.
Sure.
Because a lot of people came. They stayed at the club. We had a half a dozen bedrooms there.
Okay.
And they would stay, rather than the hotel with the crowd, they'd prefer to come there nice and quiet. I didn't let my staff or allow them to go and get any autographs and all that kind of thing.
Okay.
It was a private club, and they expected the best from us.
Okay.
And like I say, it was so many. I mean, sports figures, Ted Williams,
wow,
Johnny Unitas,
wow,
all those kind of people that you might hear if you're a football advocate or
sure, absolutely,
baseball or whatever you might like. Yeah. Somebody in that field, they brought the best, because that's what the caliber and the money that was kind of moving around, which I had to work a long time to get a piece of that money, but I stayed the course and I got there.
Wow. But it must almost break your heart now, man, to hear, the indebtedness that is there within the Hartford Club now, because now they're talking about the Hartford Club might not be able to meet its debt and may be headed to bankruptcy. They're like a million. I'm sure they want to overcome it because it has such a rich history in the city of Hartford. But that's what they're talking about now, and I'm sure folks like yourself who've you spent 40 years there, and it's meant so much to Hartford. It must at least kind of sadden you, disappoint you to some extent to know that it's been mismanaged or something.
Right. It had a lot to do with mismanagement. They brought in a outside management company to run the Hartford Club, which was a mistake. Before that, it was run by the membership, and they had a great interest. But as years change and the next generation came through, they had a tendency to get away from the club life as it was once known. And then the income tax situation back in the 90s or 80s, whenever, they changed the laws about writing off dues.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And those 3 martini lunch.
Right,
you can't write that off anymore.
Right,
so some of the members who had to pay out of their pocket, they resigned. And at one time we had probably 1,500 members. They now have around 500. And a lot of members told me when the management company came in that, Ralph, we don't belong there anymore. When they took over, and I told them all myself directly to regional general managers that we would go to a seminar, say in Ohio, Pinehurst, and I told them all I have to represent my brothers, so I was always hooked up.
Right.
They always kind of looked at this guy and said, well, how is he dressed like this?
Right.
He makes money, but I wasn't a general manager or a vice president. I had opportunities, like just not the demise, but the turn down of Joe Moniz, who was an attorney who I loved. And, and he got me out of the Hartford Club with retirement that was decent. And the president asked me, well, Ralph, why did you bring a lawyer? I said, well, I watched you guys for 40 years, and you always had a lawyer in any decision that was important to you in your life. So that's why I had a lawyer.
Sure, of course, of course. Of course, you learn from them.
Right, that's what you do.
Yeah, that's exactly, I can't even imagine, the kinds of labor issues that might have come up during your time too. I mean, considering the fact that you got, I guess you're considered domestic workers or something like that at that time.
Right.
I mean, so the laws were not necessarily friendly because you didn't get a regular pay or a salary that would be considered a livable salary. So you made money mostly off of the generosity of the people who came.
Right, the niceness of the people who cared about you because you did a service for them.
Right.
And they understood that. Now, there were some New England Yankees that they didn't care how much you served them. You could kiss their feet, but they wasn't giving you a dime.
Wow.
But they were tight people, and we had to do so many things that was a little extraordinary.
Yeah.
Due to the fact that, hey, that's what you were, a butler, in so many words. You handled their food. And
were you ever disrespected, Ralph? Did folks, I mean, did they call you the N-word behind the back? I mean, give me some of the stuff that happened in conversation that you overheard that they didn't know you were listening to.
Well, the thing, like, there was an incident that took place when everybody who were black were in kind of a bad mood, and we had to work regardless to what. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, and all the waiters and wait staff basically were black males, and they would, one member, and I understood how they operated. They didn't try to use any derogatory words or statements that would offend us. And this member who was talking to another associate probably got into their conversation, and they looked up, and we all had name tags right across your chest or breast. And he looked up and said, boy.
Wow.
And it was the day after Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and he was in a bad mood. And he walked over to the member, which we were trained not to do, said, my name, in a not too sweet a tone, that my name is Walter. I have a tag here.
Wow.
My name isn't Boy.
Wow.
Now, that was one of the few incidents I had to go over and pull him off to the side. Hey, cool it, man. I know it's tough for all of us.
Yeah.
Because I did share a few tears myself.
Right.
And I knew the north end of Hartford was kind of lightening up a little bit.
Yeah, it was on the verge of.
Yeah,
the fire was coming.
Yeah, all that came with it, but that was just another change in the life of a black man in America. I know when I started out as a young server, we got our paycheck once a week, and we didn't have a slip saying how many hours we worked, how many parties, anything. It was just a little bit of money in a brown envelope that said, this is what you earned.
Wow.
We didn't even know how much that was going to be, and it was always on the low side.
Wow.
But that was the way it was back in the day. And then when labor laws came into effect, and we got some little bit of money back because there were standards, and the club hadn't met those standards. Even though I have no regrets, I stayed the course.
I know you were happy when you saw a few black faces show up, but can you tell me what you felt like when Bill Brown showed up and, as the president of the Urban League, and now he's a member? Give us that story real quick before we leave.
Okay, well, before I get to Bill Brown, Gerald Lamb, who was the vice president for Connecticut Bank and Trust, and he was the state treasurer at one time.
Yep.
He was the first black member, and I was trying to think of who the first Jewish members. There were no women allowed, and no minority groups. No Italians or Jews. They weren't minority, but they weren't as strong as the New England Yankees. So they didn't allow any of them to become members. So they went off and built their own clubs, Tumblebrook and other places, Tunxus.
Wow.
When the big Italian ethnic group, construction company, they didn't allow them in, so they went over. They got the golf course and things like that. And those were just incidents that took place.
Sure, sure.
And like I say, the current came in with Richard Weaver Bay, and they called me. And I said, well, maybe you can call me back tomorrow. I've got to think about this because we didn't really hit it off as well as we should have.
Right, right.
And I understood that, but yet and still I know if it was the public view,
Right.
I didn't make a comment about Weaver Bay unless I was legally advised. And they said, if you don't say anything good, don't say anything.
You know, right, yeah.
So
but I mean, it had to warm your heart, man, to know that there are other, minorities who are coming in and they're not a part of the domestic and not staff that exists there,
right.
but in fact they're a part of the membership.
Right.
So you had to see the world changing, if you will, and then like I said, pioneers like yourself who've been a part of this establishment are now witnessing other pioneers, and they're coming in and being a part of the mix and a part of what's happening there and. Starting to change America, if you will.
Yeah, some of the people I even hired back in the day, I trained them. Some of them were going to college, and they were preparing to go when they were finishing up their high school careers. And like Bob Countryman, he was in charge of drug enforcement in Lower California, which had to be a tremendous job. He went to Ohio State, and there was Curtis Williams, who was a organic scientist, and he has a good job today. He retired from whatever he was doing. He traveled some of the country and the world, and there was a Gloria Bowles, who was a young lady who was paying her own way to Northwest Catholic,
wow.
who became a pediatrician. She practices in the greater Washington, D.C. area today.
Mr. Martin, I tell you, you got to come back. These shows simply aren't long enough.
Right.
And there's no way we can condense
right.
what you have to say. Certainly 81 years of your life, man, within this time frame that we have. That's the challenge for me. That's why we call the show The Challenge, trying to get it in within the time frame we have. Listen, we've had an extraordinary gentleman to show up this morning to be a part of the challenge, and I'm hoping he'll come back. You got to come back. We got to get you up, man, and somehow we got to come and cater to you now. We'll get you here so we can talk more about the legacy you leave and the things that you've done that we in this greater Hartford community should be aware of. Remember, be blessed.